Welcome back to the Fight Society podcast. I'm your host, Damon Martin, and this week it's kind of like getting the band back together because this podcast, for many, many years, my co-host, and hopefully one day this will kind of get back together. I'm just throwing that out there in the world because I like it to happen. Welcome back, of course, my former co-host, always a co-host actually of this show, Matt Brown. Matt, what's going on?
Not much, man. Just training hard, and yeah, I'm with you, man. We have to get back on the podcasting gig since life is changing nowadays.
I know. We're going to talk about all the stuff going on. I'm going to say if there's one positive about everything that's going on, it's that. I'm excited. Maybe we'll get this podcast back rolling again because I know you're always a busy man. But man, we had some good times doing the podcast for a few years there.
Yeah, I hope there's more than just one positive to it. There's a lot more positive things, but yeah, that's definitely one of the many good things.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and tackle the elephant in the room, which of course, last week you and I talked. You have declared that your fight against Diego Sanchez on November 11th will be your retirement fight. I know you've kind of talked about this in a couple other interviews, but this is your podcast, this is your home. So kind of walk me through, man. What kind of led you to that decision? What was the was there an epiphany? Was it just something that just kind of came about? What happened?
Well, it's a feeling that's been on my mind for a while. And, to be honest, if there was a scenario, if there was a opportunity where I could have retired before, I may have done that before, but the opportunity never arose. In the time I've taken, a good 9 months off, and I think by fight time it'll be about 11 months. I've explored other opportunities and coaching, and I really enjoy doing a lot of other things. And I realized that I have a lot of talents that go beyond just fighting. I don't believe that I have to just be a fighter my whole life. But I came back and fast forward now, and I'm came back and I'm fighting Diego. And in the camp, I've just kind of realized, that, I love fighting. I love it to death. I'm stoked to fight, and I love getting to fight Diego, and I think it'll make a great retirement fight. But I don't have the type of hunger that I once had. I don't have, I think, the type of hunger that it takes to make a championship run. And I think that's, I'm not in here to just fight for money or just fight just to fight. If it's not going to be working towards that championship, then I think it's best to find something else to do. Especially when I have a family and 3 kids, it's just too high risk and too low reward. The only real reward is money. Outside of you can talk about the glory and everything, but to me, the only reward is either a championship or money, and I'm not going to be fighting for money. So, I wouldn't say it was an epiphany, but it wasn't really an introspective decision either. It was more of just a feeling that I've had, and it's sort of a gut feeling, and I really fear retirement. It's something very nerve-wracking, something I'm really scared of. And that was probably what spurred it more than anything else, because, I want to chase the things that I'm afraid of and not duck and dodge them. And I'm more afraid of retirement right now than I am fighting. So that's a huge motivation for me. And kind of, I guess kind of the way I feel right now is that once I get comfortable with retirement and I'm okay with that and I'm not afraid of it anymore, then that would probably be the best time to come back to fighting.
Yeah. So the door is not completely shut on potentially coming back, but it's got to be, just like anything else, man, you got to have that fire. It's like, like if I got burnt out on writing one day and I just said, man, I'm just not into it. It just doesn't do the same thing it did for me at one point. I want to go do something else. And then I miss it at one point, and I finally realize I want to come back to it. Maybe is it something like that where you're not necessarily closing the door, but for right now it is kind of time to turn the page, so to speak.
Yeah, I want to leave that door open, but I want to see what's on the other pages. You know, I've been singularly focused very intensely with my blinders on for close to 10 years now. I've been in the UFC, and I've had nothing but championship aspirations from day one. And right now, I don't feel like I'm on that championship path. I feel like there's a possibility that maybe I just peaked out in my career. I'm not saying that that's a fact, but you know, I believe that I have more to do. But in terms of the hunger in my heart, that definitely peaked out. Now, can it come back? I believe that it totally can come back. And when I feel that it has come back and I have the hunger to go on a championship run, then I'll come back. Until I'm prepared to have that sort of hunger and that sort of just intense focus on one thing, then I think it's best to retire. And like I said, I'm not going around trying to be a journeyman or beat up a bunch of journeymen or anything like that. I mean, I want to be at the top or not at all.
Yeah. Is there any part of it, I can't remember who I had this conversation with a few months ago, but it was a great quote. Somebody said to me, like, I want to be done with the sport before the sport's done with me. You know, like, I don't want to be in a situation where people are telling me, man, you know, I think maybe it's time to call it a career. I don't want to see you get hurt. I don't want to see, you know what I mean? Like, was there any part of it, like, going out on your own terms, like, you know, making a choice? You're making a choice here to say this is going to be my retirement fight. And I also know from talking to you, you know, when you made the announcement, you said, you know, it's also, you know, kind of committing to it. You know, if you say it, you put it out there in the world, and you're committing to actually doing it, which is, you know, always part of the process. But was that part of it as well, like being done with the sport before the sport's done with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it. And I guess I didn't actually think of it that way until after I did it, and I'm like, man, you know, that's actually a good point. You know, the sport didn't chew me up and spit me out. I'm not. I still have the ability to be in there competing with the best. I still have the ability to be champion. I said, I just don't feel the hunger in my heart right now to commit to that. And yeah, I mean, you know, you hit it right on the head. I mean, I had to commit. You know, like I said, I'm very nervous and very scared of retiring. So I had to make that commitment that, you know, because I feel it and I know that it feels like the right thing to do. It's a gut feeling more than anything else. And, yeah, I had to commit to it. I had to let that feeling be what it is, and I had to go with it. And I know myself, and I know that, you know, I'm going to go beat Diego up, and I know that I would walk out of that cage and say, I'm ready to go again. Let's go. And, yeah, I definitely would not retire. So I had to commit to it now, and, you know, I'm leaving the door open. I'm not pulling from my contract or pulling out of the USADA testing pool. So, you know, who knows? Maybe by December I'll be ready to come back. Who knows? I mean, you know, I'm not trolling everybody, but you know, who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I also think it's, you know, I mean, listen, you and I, we've talked about this on the podcast numerous times, you know, it's not very often when guys get a chance to kind of leave on their own terms. I mean, you know, George St. Pierre kind of did it, and even he couldn't stay away. He's coming back now in November, and, you know, he left as a champion, and, you know, Michael Bisping, like he said that, you know, there's a good chance he's going to retire. You know, if he beats George St. Pierre, there's a good chance he's going to retire. And I applaud that. Like, dude, because, you know, and I don't want to name names, but you and I both know this, guys who have, you know, just keep fighting. And it's almost like, you know, at some point their families are telling them to retire. Dana's like calling them and saying, listen, you got to stop. You know, like, I don't think anyone wants to be on the other end of that press conference where Dana is standing there saying, yeah, I think I'm going to have a talk with him and see if I can get him to retire. Like, I don't think anyone really wants that. So we rarely see a guy or a girl, for that matter, you know, kind of go out on their own terms where they make the decision and say, you know what, you know, now's the time. I'm going to walk away and kind of do my own thing. I mean, we could probably count on one hand how many people have actually done it in our sport.
Yeah, and it's a very tough decision. Like I say, it's a scary decision, and that's why I want to do it, though. And that's what, you know, that's what I want to teach my kids. Like, don't be afraid to to do anything. Don't be afraid of anything. Just go for it. When you feel something, go for it. And I know that I'm not a shallow person. I have enough depth to me that I can go out there and I can succeed very well in something else. I have a strong work ethic. I'm a smart person. There's a lot of things in this world that I can do, and there's a lot of things in this world that I can do that would make my family life a lot easier too.
Yeah,
and make my life overall a lot easier. Have a lot less pressure on my shoulders, and and know how much money I'm going to make every year, every month, or whatever. So there's so many little factors that go into it. But like I said, right now, more than anything, I'm just not feeling it. I'm not feeling, and it's not an uncommon thing to feel that in the middle of a training camp. But this time, I think it's a little different because, I don't know why. It just feels a little different this time. I feel like this time is the right time now. I think I have some potential opportunities that could be big things. I'm most likely moving to LA to work on this muscle farm gym. My equipment company's doing pretty well. So hopefully, as scared as I am about this, it turns out to be an easy transition and turns out to be a great thing all around.
Yeah. When you and I talked last year, when you were taking some time off after you dealt with the concussion, and I think you told me that was the first concussion you really ever remember having in your career, and you wanted to take some time because it's scary. I've gone through a concussion not from fighting, but from a car accident. So you and I talked about that. Like, it's a really scary thing when you go through it. You don't realize how much a concussion can affect you. But did any of that play in your mind? When you're sitting there thinking about any of this, saying, "Listen, there's also a health factor." You got kids, you got baby Ava's growing up, your boys are growing up. I imagine being healthy and happy and being a good dad for many, many years to come also has to play a role when you talk about your own career.
Yeah, to be honest, that didn't play a role in the initial decision, but I think it definitely plays a role in the feeling that I'm having that it's time. But the decision is, I made the choice a long time ago. My kids are 7 years old, and twins are 7, and I have a 2-year-old. But that was a long time ago. I made the decision that that I was going to keep fighting despite the risks involved, and I haven't necessarily changed that decision. So it's not necessarily about that, but that's sort of more of a icing on the cake thing. And most likely whatever I end up doing next will probably be just as dangerous in some fashion. If it's not, I'll probably find a way to make it just as dangerous. That's just the way I've lived my life. So, and I don't want to teach my kids to be afraid of things like that. Go out and chase what you love, and don't be afraid to do it at all costs. So that's the way I've lived my life, and it's done well for me.
Holy crap! You just said the twins are 7. I knew that, and I know it in my head because it's been a little while since I've seen the kids. Because obviously, when you moved out to Colorado, you abandoned everyone here in Ohio. But I haven't actually seen the twins in a while. I was like, holy crap, 7 years old. That just shocked me when you said that. 7, man. Like, I remember when they were born. That just freaked me out when you said that.
Well, I have to say it a lot, so it freaks me out all the. It doesn't get any easier, man. It freaks me out all the time. Yeah, it's crazy, man. And I got a 2-year-old daughter now too, on top of it. So.
Oh man, that's so weird. Like, I remember when those kids were born. Like, it's weird. Like, when you say, like, I know they're that old. Like, you know what I mean? But like, when I hear you say that, I'm like, oh my god, they're 7.
All right. Or I just think, I'm sure you think that sometimes, like when I was 20 years old, and I think of someone that has 7-year-old kids, or kids in school or something. Oh, they're so fucking old. Here now, I'm that guy. I don't feel that old, but I'm that guy now.
Yeah, we on the podcast numerous times we always talked about all the things you do on the side. You read a ton. You're into motivation and mind exercise. You got so many other things that you're into. It's kind of funny because when you're a fighter, people kind of pigeonhole you as a fighter, and I say this from personal experience. Like when I started my own website, when I did Nerdcore Movement, people are always like, "Don't you get sick of writing?" And I was like, "No, I love writing. Sometimes I don't want to write about mixed martial arts. I love mixed martial arts, but sometimes I like to kind of stretch my brain out and do some different things. And I know you always do different things. That's got to be exciting too, though, is that you actually get to explore some different options, whether it's coaching or working on Immortal Combat equipment, which you can check out. You got your own website and you're selling equipment on there. I mean, that's as scary as retirement might be. It's got to be kind of exciting to know that you finally, get to focus your brain and your motivation on a couple different things besides just fighting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the only scary part is the financial part. I mean, my kids are getting older, like we were talking. They're 7, and man, they get more expensive every year. There's more things they want to do. And one thing I guess I never thought about with kids is every season you have to re-up on their clothing. Every freaking season, and we have to do it for 2, and at a time. And now we have a third. But last year's summer clothes don't fit again this year. So they're expensive. So yeah, the financial part is what's really the nerve-wracking part. But yeah, to get out and get in some more outdoors, some hunting and more fishing, and I like working with wood and building little things like that, and building cars and mechanical stuff. There's, like you said, the motivational stuff, the strength and conditioning is a huge thing I love doing, and training people, and of course coaching people. I mean, the list goes on and on. Tons of things that I'm into that I want to do, and I just haven't been able to explore because I've been singular-minded, and that's really what I guess kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about I don't have the championship hunger, because I have the hunger to fight, but I also have the hunger to go take my kids fishing on the weekend. And, to be a champion, the two don't really, go too well together. To be a fighter, and I'm sure some guys can do it. I'm sure some guys, are just athletic or, get by training wrong and, things like that. I'm an obsessively hard worker, though, and I can't go on like that. So, my mind isn't singularly focused right now. And again, maybe it'll get back to the point where it is, but right now it's not. And that's the whole thing we're talking about here, where that's where the big motivation comes in. And maybe even doing some writing and getting back to podcasting with you guys and things like that are kind of things running through my mind that as a champion or in pursuit of a championship don't need to be on a man's mind. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny you say it, because in mixed martial arts, we don't have an off season. Baseball players, they may play 9 months out of the year, but at least they get like a 2-month break after the season's over, where they get to go on vacation and just kind of literally get their minds off of baseball for a couple months. Football the same way. They play for 6 months. They get a few months off where they get back into camps, and you stay working out, but it's a different mindset. But there's not that mixed martial arts, and you really don't get the downtime. Like, I know even in this time you've been off over the last 9 months, like I follow you on Instagram. I talk to you often enough. You're always in the gym. It's not like you just suddenly decided I'm gonna take a 2-month vacation. Like, you don't have that luxury as a fighter, even versus other professional sports where there's a little bit of an off season. Like, there's no off season in fighting.
Yeah, sort of, I guess, and that's kind of the common thinking. I'll tell you this: I think there's a lot of guys that are taking a lot more time off nowadays, though. I think you're seeing that more and more, where guys are taking longer breaks in between fights and enjoying some of those things on the side, which, again, I'm a very obsessive person, so I have a hard time doing that. And I think that was, I think George St. Pierre, I think he was in that same boat where he was, overly obsessive about it, and I think it burned him out. At least, from the outside looking in, that's kind of what it seems like. And that's exactly it, man. Let's just, maybe we can enjoy life a little bit and take a little break. And maybe it'll be a break or maybe it'll be retirement. For right now, I plan on it being retirement, but it may just be a long break. But, the thing is, I just took a long break. So that to me is retirement.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you talked about coaching. You and I have talked about this numerous times. I think you're going to be a tremendous coach. I know you talked about maybe moving out to LA, working with Muscle Farm, because you have a lot of knowledge to spread to like the next generation of fighters. And it's one of those things where like when you have that much, when you have that kind of knowledge, and you've dropped a lot of this podcast from a lot of the books you've read, and I remember you telling me at one point, you're like, I'm always training in one form or fashion, whether it means I'm training my body or I'm training my mind. And I think that's something you can pass along to the next generation of fighters because you've seen it all. I mean, you've been through the highs, you've been through the lows. You faced every kind of opponent you can face, physically and mentally. And I think that's something I think is I know you have interest in coaching, but I'm telling you right now, I think you're going to be a tremendous coach. If that ends up being one of the things you dedicate yourself to, I think you'll be one of the best in the sport.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I'll probably be a better coach than I was a fighter. I think that's really a skill that I'm going to focus on developing. And the thing with the coaching is it's not something that I want to it's something I want to do right away. But I feel like in coaching, there's so much more to it than people kind of give credit for. There's an entire world. Like everybody, learns about the techniques of being a fighter but I think there's just as many techniques in being a coach, too. So I want to learn the entire sort of broad spectrum of being a coach inside and out. And, I think obviously I have, more knowledge than pretty much any coach that's out there right now. I have more experience. And, there's no coach that's been through what I've been through. And I was more or less self-taught up until the UFC. So, I think I have a lot of knowledge to share, and, I want to continue to evolve and grow the sport, and, I'm happy to do it. And, the hard part, I think, is being a coach is dealing with personalities, to be honest. It's not that's the biggest problem with being a coach because it's not the techniques that are hard, and it's not the game planning, the strategy, the mental side. It's that you just have all these different personalities, most of them alphas, and most of them have their own way of doing things, or were taught a certain way, or pick this up to here, or there, whatever. And, you're just dealing with these multiple personalities on a constant basis, and that's the hardest thing to deal with for sure.
Yeah.
And that's a skill that I'll really have to develop.
Yeah. Well, you've seen it, because our sport is still so young that we haven't seen, that many fighters. I mean, a lot of fighters own gyms, but that's a different animal. But actually coaching is a whole different thing. But we've seen it in more recent years, like a guy you work with, Dwayne Ludwig, where he was a great fighter, but he's become a tremendous coach. His knowledge is just, out there. And then you look at Justin Buchholz, who I know just recently fought, but I mean, he's turned into a tremendous coach for Team Alpha Male, and their whole team is now just ex-fighters coaching, like Danny Castillo and Chris Holdsworth, and like all those guys bring that knowledge of, what they did in the cage, but also the knowledge, and they bring it to coaching. And I think we're starting to see more of that, where guys are transitioning out, and they're not just owning gyms, they're actually becoming really good coaches. And I think that's, hey, listen, I take nothing away from the Greg Jacksons of the world who, didn't necessarily fight, but they're tremendous coaches. But there's something to be said for having that experience, inside and outside the cage that you can bring to a fighter and help them get ready for competition, whether that's a guy who's 1-0 or a guy who's, going for a UFC title.
Yeah, and it's a double-edged sword, too. Not all fighters are going to make good coaches, that's for sure. And not all coaches were good fighters. So it's definitely a double-edged sword. And the other side is, a lot of fighters are biased towards, what they did or what they do, right? So, I think that's where my biggest advantage is. I've had so many, I've been exposed to so many different ways, and I've been to so many different gyms, and obviously I have, tons of fights, as many as just about anybody in the UFC. There's only a few people ahead of me on the number of fights. So, yeah, I think I bring a lot more to the table, and I've studied, a lot of the science of this stuff, and bring a bit of a different perspective. So I really look forward to that side of my life, and I'm really excited to do that. When I coached Jesse Taylor for the Ultimate Fighter finale, man, that was a great experience, and he's just one of the greatest guys to coach. He's the type of guy you could tell him, hey, run on the treadmill, and you come back 24 hours later and he'll still be on the treadmill. So you got to make sure that you tell him, okay, get off the treadmill now. But he's just that kind of guy. That good, that open of a fighter, and man, what a great camp that was, and to give back like that was one of the greatest feelings ever. So that was probably a little bit of some of the motivation for this too. I mean, what a great feeling giving back like that.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. When you become a coach, you're not only building fighters, but you're building people around you. It's like, every time I talk to one of the guys who trains at Jackson's, even though that's such a big gym, they always talk about how it's still a family. You know what I mean? Like, there's some people who go there and it just doesn't work out because they just don't fit into that mold. And they end up leaving, and that's fine. Not everyone's going to be a perfect fit there, but if you're a coach, you're a head coach, you're going to work with the guys who you want to work with, and who kind of work with you in the way maybe like Jesse Taylor did or whatever. Doesn't necessarily one size does not fit all with coaching, just like any coach in the NFL or Major League Baseball or sport. So like I said, man, if you eventually do that, you build a team around you, man. You have a whole team of immortals running around. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I'll be implementing my style, my fan-friendly style, on a lot of other guys. So you're going to have a lot of exciting fighters coming up underneath me.
Yeah, I know. It's like I said, man. It's exciting. It's funny. I'm going to out you here. You may, if people go back to the old editions of the podcast, they'll know this. But just in case they don't, I'm going to out you here. Everyone always thinks of Matt Brown, the Savage. Matt Brown, the Savage inside the cage, but on the off time, I'm sorry I'm letting out your little secret here, you're a bit of a book nerd too. You like to read a lot, so you know a lot of shit.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't know if book nerd would be the way to describe it, but
don't deny it, bro. Come on now, you're a book nerd. Don't lie.
Well, I could say that because I read a lot of books, but the fact is, I don't really read books for enjoyment. Like, I read books because of the knowledge in them, right? I'm interested in fighting, so I read about how to be a better fighter. So it's not like I'm, now Damon, now you're the book nerd. You read the entire Game of Thrones, right?
That's true. That's true.
And I actually bought that book, the first one, I think on my Kindle or something. And then I seen the number of pages, and I didn't even read the first fucking page. I was like, "There's no way, I'm not doing it." I was like, I don't care if this is the greatest book in history. I don't care if it changes my life. I'm not reading this shit. So yeah. So anyway, my point, is, man, I'm definitely a big reader, and I believe in it, and it definitely makes me a better person and more relaxed and smarter, more knowledgeable person, obviously, and everything. But it's all about just getting that knowledge, and I think it's more so than being a book nerd, so to speak, is I'm willing to do whatever I have to do to go get that knowledge. When I first started reading, I mean, I was suffering through books. I mean, it was very hard, but I wanted that knowledge so bad that I'd stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning just shoving these books in my face. And that was before I had kids. So now it's, till 10 o'clock instead. But yeah, the point's still the same. I mean, I'm still, I like doing it, but yeah. So
I remember. I think if I remember correctly, you were telling me a story one time. You were in one fight camp. I can't remember which one it was, but you were driving around in Denver, and I think you said you had a book on tape playing. Like, that's how deep it goes. Like, you were just mentally, listen. I think it was like a book about mental toughness or mental strengthening. I can't remember what it was about, but if I remember correctly, you even listened to books on tape. Like, you were always adding to the knowledge base.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I listen to lots of books on the Audible, and what I'll do is if the book is good, I use Audible more for a tester. I'd be like, oh, that's a pretty good book, and then I'll go buy it and actually absorb it. And like some books, like for instance, Super Training, that book, I'm going through that right now, and I'm taking it's the 4th or 5th time I've been through the book, and now I'm going through and extracting notes from the book and taking pictures and it's nice we have these devices now where we can do things like that. So I'm kind of consolidating the book so I can really consolidate the knowledge that's relevant to myself, and I can put it into my own practice. So, and that's really, I'm always trying to explore new ways. I always listen to podcasts and audio books and purchasing new books, and just always trying to get that knowledge any way I can. I'm always watching YouTube and listening to other fighters, man. You'd be surprised how much knowledge other fighters give out. So, just listen to them. What are they doing? And the hard part is really just deciphering everything and kind of, extracting what's relevant out of all the knowledge.
Yeah, every time I talk to you, and you're always talking about the books and stuff that you're listening to, like this guy's coaching and this guy's mental strengthening. I'm always like, God, maybe I should put down the Game of Thrones. But then I think about how I put Game of Thrones into use on Nerdcore Movement, so at least I can justify it because I'm using it for something. Damn it!
Oh yeah, so you're monetarily, you're getting paid to read Game of Thrones. Like what? How much better of a life could you have? Yeah,
and listen, you'd be pissed off if I didn't read Game of Thrones, because then who would you call if you needed Game of Thrones knowledge, right? Like, you'd be pissed off if I just gave up Game of Thrones one day, so...
Bro, if it weren't for you, I'd have no fucking idea what's going on in Game of Thrones right now. I think I'd be completely lost. And I've watched these videos. Every now and then I see these videos, like on Facebook or whatever, where they're kind of explaining, the history or the future or whatever. And, man, I miss so much. Like, I don't know how I don't know. Even though I know what's going on, it's like I don't even know what the hell's really going on.
This fight November 11th, man, I'm coming down for it. I can't wait. Everyone's going to come down and know, you got family from north and south coming up this fight. And talking about a great guy to go out with, man, Diego Sanchez, another legend, a guy who's kind of built his career in a lot of the same ways you have by going out there and just putting on wars and fights, the fans love to see. I mean, this feels like, not to say you have to handpick the guy you're going to go out on, but man, this seems like the kind of fight. Like if you're going to go out, if you're going to call it a career, and this actually is, retirement, man, there's no better guy to go out with than Diego Sanchez.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. So I think it's going to be fireworks, and I think it's going to be an amazing fight. We're going to go out there. We're going to. What are we going to do? We're going to try to knock each other's fucking heads off.
We talked earlier about the whole, being done with the sport before the sport's done with you. It's kind of funny. I'll say it's not funny. I don't want to say it's a joke by any stretch of the imagination, but, you're making this choice going into this fight saying it's my retirement fight, and, you're committing yourself to it. There have been the flip side of people saying that Diego should, think about it. He's kind of suffered through, kind of a down part of his career. And now he's bouncing back up to 170 against, obviously, a savage knockout artist like yourself. I mean, take yourself out of the equation a little bit. What do you think about Diego going into this one, man? Because there's going to be the people who say, like, you're retiring of your own choice. You're saying, as I said, you want to be done with the sport before the sport's done with you. It almost feels like, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it's a little bit the reverse with Diego. Like, the guy just, he has no quitting in him, and I love that about him. But, at what point do we sit there and say, man, maybe you should think. I don't know. What do you think? Am I wrong? Am I off base on that?
No, I think you're right on. I think Diego's time for him to retire, and I think I'm going to retire him. And I would ask. I don't know if I'd ask. I think Diego should retire on the same night. I think it'd make the fight even more historical and memorable, and I think it'd be awesome for both of us. And I think we'll have a great fight to both go out on, and the time definitely seems up for him, I think, and he's had a great career, and unfortunately for him, he's bounced between lots of weight classes. He's fought for the title. He's done everything that he can do, and I can't imagine him really believing that he's on his way back to a title. So, what's the point? So I say, let's go out together, Diego, and let's try to, let's just go out together, man. Let's go out with a bang and let's do it together.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, talk about what a hell of a way to go out, man. Two legends of the sport, like I said, man. There's so rarely do you get an opportunity like that. And I love Diego, man. Great guy, fierce competitor. But like I said, the time comes for everybody. There's no shame in that. I mean, that's just that's the nature of athletics, man. You can't go forever.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And yeah, Diego's a great guy, man. I've met him a few times, and I think we've always looked at each other like we have met each other a few times, and we've always looked at each other, sizing each other up, knowing that the day is going to come. We're going to war. I was always wondered if it ever happened because he kept going back down to 55 and 45 and, all these different things. And so, now our paths have finally crossed. And, I don't see him going back to the title no matter what happens in this fight. So yeah, man, I think we should do it together at the same time. I think it'd be historical, memorable. Yeah. I've never seen two fighters retire on the same night. So.
Yeah. Now I always ask the hard hitting questions, so I'm sure this will be one of those ones where you really have to dig down in your soul to find the answer for it. But I'm totally joking. So have you thought, because potentially this is the last one? Have you thought about the walkout song for this one? And the reason I'm bringing it up is because obviously our mutual friend Jamie Josta wrote a great song for you, which I still play, and obviously I've been on Josta's podcast. Great guy. I will not lie and say that every single time I'm in the car and Avenged Sevenfold, Hail to the King comes on, it takes me back to that moment with Eric Silva. I will never forget that moment in Cincinnati, Ohio. I know it's one of your favorite fights. So have you thought about that? I know the walkout song sounds stupid, but I do know that is something that for some fighters like yourself, it actually is kind of an important part of the process.
Yeah, I've thought of a few different things. I haven't really decided on one yet. Yeah, man, there's so many different ones. You got any suggestions?
I'll tell you what, we were going to talk about this anyways, dude. I think you can find a Mastodon song. Just switch it up, man. Mastodon's like your favorite, one of my favorites. I don't know one particular track I'd point to, and I know they're not, typically that kind of like, pump your fist, like run out to the cage kind of metal. They're a little different kind of sounding metal, but I love Mastodon, man. I think it'd be different. Switch things up a little bit on people.
Yeah, yeah. I just can't think of a Mastodon song that would fit though. Is the only thing. Because like you said, they're definitely not the pump your fist metal. They're not the hate breed type chanting the verse or chanting the chorus type song. You know what I mean? Like they're definitely like a creative, unique brand of man. They're hardly even metal anymore. Like they're like hard rock, like experimental. This new EP they just released. I mean, that's not a metal EP. Like that is a fucking rock and roll, like experimental. I don't know, man. It's got like everything from like the Bee Gees to fucking Guns N' Roses in it. They just. I mean, they're so creative and. It's cool to see how they've kind of went from, just a pure hard metal band back in the day to this monster that just, writes amazing songs that are accessible to the regular people, but us old timer fans we still get what they're doing and understand it. But for a walkout song, I don't know if they're going to work. I thought about the other day I was listening to Converge, and they had this song. I never even heard it before. It's called "All We Love, We Leave Behind," and I actually thought about that one. So, but we'll see how it goes on the day, man. Sometimes I wait till the last minute to even decide, but it's got to be. Usually, it's one of those things like you just know it when you hear it.
Yeah. It's funny you said Mastodon, their new EP. We were talking about that before the podcast. I like it. I love it. Like I love the transition they've made and some kind of different sounds. Have you heard the new All That Remains? Have you heard that album? Yeah. Not a lot though. I have it downloaded. This Apple Music and Amazon Music these days, we can listen to everything any day. So yeah I do have it. Haven't listened to it a ton. But yeah, what about it? Well, see, I like it to a point, but like the way they've changed, like they do a cover of Thunder Rolls, the Garth Brooks song, which is just
that was awesome.
Yeah, so but like
you didn't like it?
No, I like it was just such a random choice. Like it was just such a random choice. But like some of the things that All That Remains has done in their changing of styles, I haven't liked as much. Not to say I don't like some of their songs, I do. I would say that I still like more of the older All That Remains than I do the newer stuff.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that with Mastodon. Like, I still love the old stuff, but like some of the new stuff, it's like it still clicks with me. Like that last album, like even the radio track, which a lot of people would say was maybe their most radio friendly song, which is fine. But like the news, like even that EP, like it's different and it doesn't sound like the first Mastodon album, but I still love it. Like it's weird. I don't get that same feeling with All That Remains. Like I like it, but I don't love it. With Mastodon, it's like I can listen to the new stuff or I can listen to the old stuff. I love them both.
Yeah, and I think All That Remains is a great example where it's to me what it feels like is like there's All That Remains changed. They intentionally wrote songs to open up to a broader audience, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not one of these haters when bands sell out or whatever, but I think there was a lot more of an intention to what All That Remains was doing and get more radio, get more listeners, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Mastodon evolved. They didn't change, right? Like you can go through every album and hear the evolution. I mean, you can hear how what they were doing at the time fit into what they were doing. Like it wasn't meant to do anything except expand their creativity, and they weren't doing it to get on the radio. I'm not sure if they've ever done anything to get on the radio. Like you said, maybe the radio song, I assume you're talking about Show Yourself, was maybe written for the radio, but I read an interview about the drummer talking about that song, and he was like, they kind of all didn't want that song at first, but then the more they kind of did it, they were like, it started catching on. They're like, dude, this is actually a fucking good song. We got to do this, and they're like, let's not be afraid of exploring these boundaries. Why are we putting boundaries on our art? And so that's, to me, is a whole different level. And All That Remains is one of my favorite bands. So, not taking nothing away from them, but when you compare the two, like Mastodon is just jumping over fences and kicking down doors and going through, in this art that's just through the entire universe, where All That Remains, I felt like they kind of, it was much more intentional and much more reasoning behind it.
Yeah. Well, you could say the same thing about Avenged Sevenfold. And when you listen to their first album compared to their most recent couple albums, you can hear some people say, oh, they sold out to, get on the radio or whatever, and that's fine. But, like, I still love Avenged Sevenfold. Like, I can listen to Hail to the King the same way I can their first, the Sounding the Seven Trumpets, whatever it's called. I can listen to both albums and still love it. And, like, their new album that's, like, the concept album that's, like, the, all, one theme or whatever it is, like, I didn't dig it as much. I enjoyed it. It didn't click with me as much as some of their other albums, but I like that they took that chance. I like that they're like, you know what, fuck it. We're going to do a concept album, and, like, our 8th studio album, it's going to be a, fucking Pink Floyd, concept album. Like, it didn't necessarily click for me as, like, my favorite Avenged Sevenfold record, but I love that they did it. Like, I love that they took that chance and said, fuck it, we're doing this for us, and it's not, it's not about anybody else.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I love that. But I'm surprised. Avenged is one of those bands where, their first, was it 1 or 2 albums that were like the screamcore. I didn't even really care for those. I mean, and I heard of them before they were really famous on the radio or anything. But I was like, man, it's not really my style of music. And then when they changed, and I think it was Backcountry was the original song that, kind of got them in the mainstream, and I was like, dude, these guys are fucking awesome. Like, it's great, and, I mean, you got a pure metalhead here. Like, I listened to everything from fucking Behemoth to, Led Zeppelin, and, and I was like, not really into that, but then they put it, they changed the music, to me, it was a positive direction. So, yeah, I mean, Avenged, I think, is a great example, and, maybe they've went a little bit more radio, but gosh, man, like they're putting out some fucking amazing music. I'm surprised you don't like that new album more than that, especially being as big of a Vince fan as you are. I think you got their fucking tattoo on you. Right?
I do. No, I like it. I do like it. I like it. It's just like anything else. So, like I said, I'm always like, which album am I going to listen to the most? Like, their second album is still the album I listen to the most of all their albums, but I listen to all their albums. And I like the new album. And actually, what's funny is the first time I listened to the new album, I was kind of like, okay, it's pretty good. And then I went back and listened to it, and I found more tracks that I liked. It's just like anything else, though. Like I'm one of those people, like, I listen to the new Foo Fighters record, and I love Foo Fighters. They're not metal, obviously, but I love Foo Fighters. But I listened to their new record the first time. I was like, yeah, it's all right. It's pretty good. And, like, Foo Fighters is one of my favorite bands. But then I started listening to it more and more. And, like, now, on, like, my 6th or 7th listen, I'm like, okay, I'm really starting to dig this album. Like, they have one track that's, like, very Pink Floyd-esque on there. And then, like, they have another one that's just all acoustic, which is kind of different. And it's kind of like talking about doomsday and shit. Like, it sounds so happy-go-lucky, but then you can tell it's called 0 Hour. It's like talking about doomsday and shit. And so it's like the more I listen to it, the more I like it. And I think that's kind of what the Avenged Sevenfold album was for me. Like, the first time I listened to it, I was like, all right, this is good. It's solid. Nothing really stood out to me. But then the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. I think that's just kind of the way it goes with some bands. I think it's the bands you like the most. You have to listen to the albums like numerous times to really like get into the depths of what they're talking about and what the lyrics are, and I don't know. At least that's how it is for me.
Well, I always I kind of analogize music to as like a woman, and if on the first date, everything about her, she's probably a pretty shallow bitch, right? Well, it's the same with music. Like if the first time you listen to it, it's the fucking greatest song ever, and you just sing right along, and by the time the chorus comes around the third time, you're already singing along with it. I mean, it's probably a radio song, right? And, when you have a band's deep, have deep music like, Avenged or, especially like a Mastodon or, bands like this, it takes more than one listen. I mean, no one got Stairway to Heaven the first time they listened to it, right? That's what makes a great song, man. That's what makes a great piece of art, I think, altogether, is when, if you look at a painting and immediately you look at it and it's amazing, it's probably not a very deep painting, right? But if you look at, something like, Michelangelo drew or something, I mean, you have to look deep into the little details, and you don't get them from far away. You have to get in closer, and you have to look at it 100 times, and the 100th time you're seeing shit you didn't see the first time, and that's why I can appreciate bands like a Behemoth or a Cradle of Filth, who just came out with a new fucking killer album, and there's so much depth to it, and it's much more than just a I don't know, just a something just to hear once and sing along and with your kids and shit. There's some depth to it, and that's the same thing you want in a woman, right? Like, you want to be able to talk to her fucking 20 years from now and like maybe learn something new, right? Or still have a stimulating conversation about it. That's what makes great music.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just pile on all the other shit you can do after fighting is done. You could get a radio show, man. Do just a fucking metal hour and program your music, dude. I guarantee there's a radio station or Sirius XM or somebody out there that fucking kill to get you to pick some music and do like a metal show, dude. I bet you'd have a blast doing that.
I'd fucking love to, man. That'd be a really awesome thing. So if anybody out there is listening, serious, everybody, metal show would be awesome. I've listened to enough that I should fucking have one.
Yeah, dude, and that's you stay up on the current shit. You talk about Cradle of Filth. I knew they just had a new album come out last week. I haven't had a chance to listen to it. Like I knew it came out, but I haven't really listened to it yet. So it's like, because I was waiting for that Mastodon EP to come out, even though it's only like 4 songs. That was the one that was kind of like on my radar more than anything. But yeah, Cradle of Filth just came out with the new one. I kind of forgot about that. So see, you're on more on top of shit than I am.
Well, I got another one for you too. Arch Enemy just came out with an album this week too.
Did they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, man. And I haven't got a chance to dig deep into it yet, but on first listen, I was like, yeah, that's fucking on point, man.
Nice. Yeah, I remember you saw them here in Columbus, didn't you? Didn't you say there was like nobody at the show? It was like a real small concert when they played here?
Yeah, there's probably, I don't know, fucking 100 people there.
Oh man, they're a good band too. That's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, they're more. I mean, they're definitely more of a even within the metal scene. I think it takes a certain type of person to like them a shit ton, and especially enough to go watch them live. And over in Europe, they're selling out arenas. Europe's different, when it comes in terms of metal, and they're over there selling out arenas over there where people respect their technical skills a lot more, because they're a very technical band. And I've liked them since the beginning. So I don't like the new singer quite as much, but they're still out there fucking killing it, man. I look forward into digging it deep into this new album and seeing what it brings.
Yeah, that's like Meshuggah. Like Meshuggah plays in the States and they do solid shows over here, but then if you go see them over in like Sweden or some of the places in Europe, they fucking sell out arenas over there. So it's just like, everyone's got their own kind of acquired taste. What sells in America doesn't always sell in Europe and vice versa.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Meshuggah's a fucking great example. I mean, goddamn, you talk about a band that you have to dig deep into. First listen, I mean, these guys, never really sound that good, but God, the more you listen to them, you're just blown away. I mean, their technical prowess is out of this fucking world.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're amazing. They're one of those bands that I heard the first time. I was like, okay, they're pretty good. And then like you just continue to listen to it, and like you said, it just keeps getting deeper and deeper the more you listen to it.
Yeah, it's a fucking rabbit hole for sure with Meshuggah. If you look on some of the YouTube stuff and guys trying to play their music, man, I mean, God, it's so hard to fucking play, man. I play guitar, so I kind of hear, a lot of what they're doing, and sometimes you're just like, dude, how in the fuck are they doing that? And especially the drummer. I think they probably got the best drummer in the world.
Yeah. Well, all I know is you're raising your kids right. You had that video on Instagram a couple months ago with, I can't remember which one of your kids it was, one of the twins, was sitting there by himself listening to Mastodon. I was like, you know what? That Matt Brown, he's a good dad. It's a good dad right there.
Dude, that was my son Hunter, dude. He's obsessed with Mastodon. He wanted a Mastodon cake for his birthday.
Oh, that's awesome.
And my wife was looking for a Mastodon cake. She's like, "What?" She's like, "How the fuck am I supposed to find a Mastodon cake?" I'm like, "You don't have to get him a Mastodon cake." But Mastodon was here just the other day. He's like, "I want to go to the concert." And almost got it to be the first concert, but my daughter was having her birthday, so I didn't get to make his first concert Mastodon. So
plenty of time though. He's young. He's got plenty of time.
He's got plenty of time. So he loves Mastodon and Iron Maiden. Those are his two favorites. And then my other one, his favorite is Ozzy, and I think just Ozzy. Really, he really loves fucking Crazy Train.
That's all the moments when you're a proud father, when you're like, well, so what made you cry the most as a dad? Was it their first steps, or when they said dad the first time? It's like, hey, when I walked down, he was listening to Mastodon on his own. It was a really proud moment for me.
I gotta admit, that was a very proud moment. I was like, yes, I did it. I've accomplished my fatherly duties, and I can sit back and rest now.
I love it. All right, bro. I'll let you get out of here, man. I know it's kind of late for you. I want to, get you out of here. Obviously, I'm sure we'll talk again before the fight. Obviously, I'll be down at the fight in Virginia, but I want to get you on this week with all the news and everything. And we'll get Lober back on. We'll get the whole band back together for the podcast before the fight. But, man, enjoy training camp. Enjoy this one. And, we'll catch up in a couple of weeks. We'll get you back on. We'll talk about some other shit. And I know you always got thoughts of other shit going on in the sport, so we want to get your thoughts on that stuff too. So, and then, like I said, hopefully, man, like to get the podcast going again one day, man. It's not the same without you.
Yeah, I think after the fight, we'll have to start ramping things back up.
I love it. All right, bro. I appreciate it as always, man. We'll talk. We'll talk off the air, but we'll get back on the podcast again before the fight at some point. We got 2 months, so we got some time.
Sounds great, brother.
All right, man. I'll talk to you after a while.
All right, later, man.
Later. There you go. Matt Brown back for the attack here on the Fight Society podcast. Obviously, it's a big couple months for him as he leads into his retirement fight. We'll be doing some cool stuff with him down in Virginia. I'm going to shoot some video with Matt, kind of commemorate this last fight. Obviously, listen, I know, we're always supposed to be unbiased, but, I'm going to be a little bit biased on this one. Matt's been my co-host on the podcast we did the podcast together for about 2 or 3 years solid, myself and him. And, of course, we had Mark Coleman on the show and my boy Jeremy Loper, who's missing today, but he will be back next week. But, so we're going to be doing some cool stuff with Matt leading into the fight. And, lots to talk about between now and November 11th, so make sure to stay tuned for that. I want to say thanks to everyone that tunes in each and every week to the Fight Society podcast. Make sure you check us out on iTunes, on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. And then if you hashtag us on Twitter, it's Fight Society. And you can find me at Damon Martin. You can find Matt Brown at I Am The Immortal on Twitter. And we will see you guys in 1 week's time as we gear up for UFC 216 in Las Vegas. We're going to be talking about the fights with Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee, of course, Demetrius Johnson, and Ray Borg. Unfortunately, we lost the fight between Jess Guy and Paige Van Zandt. That's a bit of a bummer, but we'll talk about Fabricio Verdum and Derek Lewis. That's another big one. So, stay tuned for all of that. Thanks again for everyone tuning in, and we'll see you next week for more Fight Society podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.